the Instagram. Hi, I'm Terrence, also known as Afro Daddy, but you know that because you're watching that on my Instagram channel. You probably know who this person is too.
I really hope so by now. Otherwise, this is just awkward.
Yeah.
Who's this random woman?
Okay, say hello to everyone. I'm just going to lock the door because it's banging for the wind.
Oh, hello. Okay, we had to put because two of us on the screen, so I see. Hi, Lindy. Oh, Liz, my Auntie Liz in the UK. Hello.
Hey, Liz. Auntie Liz. I'm going to have to chat to this guy.
And Marinus. Is that right?
Yes, he's the baby Cairo.
Yes, the baby Cairo.
Because I used to be very good with winding babies, and then I winding? No, that's not the word I was looking for. Burping. Winding babies. Burping babies. I was very good at burping babies, but until I spoke to that guy, I realized that he was the burping genius.
Okay.
So, cool. We've got some people joining in. Candice, just Candice. Hi, Candice, just Candice. Bing. We need to get our eyes tested.
We need to get our eyes. The phone is so far away, to be fair.
Yeah, because we have to fit two big heads in one screen. So lots of brains and lots of hair. So cool. Okay, well, people are watching, so let's get into this conversation. Let's not leave it any longer. We want to chat about the podcast that we have been putting out for the last 4 weeks. Episode 5 is coming out this Friday. We've received over the last 4 weeks a lot of questions and conversations about the podcast.
We've received conversations about the podcast.
We've had conversations about the podcast.
We've received comments.
You know, for someone who does, for someone who just sits, right? This is the thing.
To make sure you don't sound dumb.
Oh my goodness! When it comes to us producing anything, this is why we don't work together. Because what happens is, I do all the work, Julie sits down, and then she criticizes.
No, I edit.
No, she tells me what to edit. Actually. Okay.
I executive produce.
So we want to clarify some major things to understand in the podcast, and we hope that with this live stream and hopefully this video later on, you will have a better way to listen, because then you'll actually get more context as to what's going on in the podcast. Do you want to briefly tell people what the podcast is about in case they don't know?
Sure. So it's called Three's a Crowd. You can find it on any podcasting platform.
Any podcasting
Anyone.
platform. Yeah.
Spotify, we're on it.
What other podcasting platforms are
Apple.
there?
What do you call it? Apple? What do you call the Apple one? Apple Podcasts.
In case you didn't know, I was married to a 75-year-old woman. What's with the Apple thing? Where do I find the podcasts?
You know, yes. On YouTube. I don't know where else you can find it, but basically...
The best... Okay, let me just jump in again.
Just click Terrence's bio.
It's all in the bio. It's easy. Don't search for it on these channels. It's hard to find with the algorithm. Just go into the bio and you'll find the link to all the platforms there, and you can enjoy it at your leisure.
Yes. So basically, it's a podcast of our conversations trying to make the big life choice about whether or not to have another baby. And maybe just the backstory is that we've been having this conversation amongst ourselves for many years. It sort of ebbs and flows as...
You mean between ourselves? Not, like when you say amongst, it sounds like there's like 20 of us having this conversation.
Sure. Between the two of us.
Edited!
Hi, Louise, favorite couple. Hello, welcome. So it's me and I'm here. Oh, cool. Yes, Spotify. Thank you. Exactly. Spotify. Spotify's
oh my word.
Spotify should sponsor our podcast.
No, we don't want that, because then we'll only be on Spotify.
Oh.
We can't be anywhere else. We're going to be on
does any other platform exist? I'm joking. Okay. Back to the podcast. So
it's going to be such a long live stream just to get Julie to focus and not talk about anything technical.
It's a conversation that we've been having.
Yes.
Between ourselves, amongst you and me, in the company of just the two of us, for many years. In different seasons of our marriage, it's kind of popped up again, and then it's gone quiet again.
Yeah.
But it's been on the cards.
Different feelings and emotions going through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've swapped around who has approached the subject. It's normally been me broaching the topic, but hasn't always been. And when we started sort of deciding to take it a little bit more seriously at the beginning of this year, because we love digital content, and we listen to a lot of podcasts, and podcasts have really given us many great things to talk about. The things we hear about relationships and raising kids and I don't know, anything else. We thought, okay, there must be some content out there. Like, how do people make this decision? Like, people make these decisions for many, many personal reasons, and the specifics we obviously understand are dependent on other couples. Like, no one's going to know how we make the decision, but there must be some sort of a process that people go through. Like, how do you have the conversation and get to a conclusion?
Yeah.
And so we were like looking, and we couldn't find anything. And so we were like, okay, well, we're talking about this anyway, and we have some software and some hardware. I'm pretty certain I've bought you some of the things. So we're talking about it anyway, why don't we just press record? And I will say, proviso, when we started recording at the beginning of the year, we did it really, really with the reassurance that we're just going to press record, have a conversation, like it may never see the light of day.
In fact, it was probably personal. Like, we were like, it's probably not going to release it. And also, there was a question of, would anyone want to listen?
Yes.
Because it's like, will it be like listening to someone talk about their dreams? It's like, great, it's very interesting for you, but I don't want to sit you for half an hour and listen to you ramble on about the whale that stole your teeth or whatever. It's the whole thing. So there were a lot of debates about that, but again, this is kind of the way we like to process stuff by creating the content and structuring the conversation. We actually found that was a useful way to progress the conversation over a period of time.
Yeah, and it made it it was, when we pressed record, we created, you kind of got to create a sound, a noise-free kind of environment. The kids have to be in bed. It's not something you can do on the fly and have it be good. So it became like a really focused date night conversation, normally accompanied by a glass of wine or hot chocolate. Or something like that.
Yeah, we've recorded episodes in bed.
Yeah, we have.
When it was like the coldest part of winter.
Yeah, with like mic stands coming from either side of the bed.
And I can tell you can actually, if you listen closely, you can hear which episode it is, because the first episodes we're kind of talking like this. We talk kind of quickly, and we're in it, and then that episode hits, and it's like, so what's the deal?
Sip hot chocolates. Yeah. So that's kind of the backstory. And then I think what has been proven true very quickly after we released it, and what we were hoping would happen, is that like, surely we're obviously not the only people talking about this. Because I did kind of think like, are we the only people who talk about this to this degree? But it became abundantly clear that was not the case, because so many people responded, lots of DMs, lots of like, oh, I'm listening, and like we haven't made it public yet, but we are also having this conversation, but we're really scared of being judged because we've already got X amount of kids, or we told everyone we're never going to have any more kids, and now we're thinking about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the exact roller coaster of emotion that we've been on.
Yeah, exactly. Or like people saying that they don't want to get people excited about the idea of them having a kid or more kids. And there's a lot of complexity in these conversations. So it's understandable why they aren't public, because it is very personal, and there's a lot of things that people who aren't insane like us won't be happy with the world knowing or knowing.
The depths of your vulnerability.
The depths of how loopy these conversations can make you. What is interesting though for me is that a lot of people actually responded with the same kind of comment that Candace had. Candace saying that she's 39 years old with a 9-year-old, and I won't be having any more kids. My husband and I decided this a while ago, but I'd still be interested in listening to the two of you reaching your decision. So there's also this category of people who aren't in the same space that we're in. They don't identify with the struggle of having this conversation of one partner wants to have another child, one partner doesn't. They're very settled in their family structure, but they're still curious. There's still a lot of curiosity as to how couples even reach this decision.
And we love that for you, because that's exactly why content creators make content so that people can have their curiosity piqued, and we're here for the conversation. Listen in.
So yeah, very, very keen for those people to listen in, and also offer like wisdom, because I still think those people should be part of the larger conversation as well. Like actually people like Candice, that you're like a unicorn to us. Like someone who has made the decision, who is comfortable, who's confident, who's like, and it's not that you have 20 kids or whatever. You have your 9-year-old and you're happy with that, and you're settled, and you know settled. Like, how did you get to that point where both of you were settled? And was there any doubt? Was there a time thing? I mean, obviously, Candice, I don't expect you to go into all of that detail, but when people are they've made a decision and they're satisfied with the decision, there's no buyer's remorse with that. That's really interesting for us, because that is so not our experience, where both of us have flip-flopped either way.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of other people have joined. Hi
everyone.
Make handmade goods.
Ooh, that sounds
very interesting. Wearing all my hats and the Messy Hub.
And the Matsatsi Foundation. Hey Tiff.
Hey Tiff, how's it going? So can I ask you about, because this whole thing was originally Julie's idea, because we were having these conversations, and like she said, Julie was like, I wonder if we should make this into, like, if we should record these conversations, which was pretty crazy for me in the first place. But what was your biggest fear in putting this podcast out? Because, like you said, when we were recording, we recorded it with a proviso that either one of us could veto the whole show or any episode. We could just say, that's not going out. I said stuff that's way too personal. I'm not comfortable with stuff going out. So what was your biggest fear in us putting it out? And what was the thing that was most likely to stop you?
I think judgment. I think many people, maybe many women will relate to this, because I had a whole bunch of really complicated feelings, and they sort of started spilling out quite quickly. I think all you need to do is scroll through social media and go into any parenting group online, where just because of how brutal the economy is right now, people are, struggling to make ends meet, and are literally asking if anyone's got a plate of food for them or their children. I mean, I see that on some of the big popular groups quite often, and it feels a little bit luxurious to be thinking, I think people understand the concept of maybe choosing to have a child, and then maybe choosing to have a sibling for said child, but the idea of adding any more than what at least the Western world has, and the Western adopted philosophies have deemed an appropriate number for a nuclear family. I mean, who decides these things? But there is this sort of general, undertone of family of 4, 2 adults, 2 kids. Totally outdated, but that is true. That having this conversation just felt quite privileged, and then also felt maybe not, and we discussed this in the episode, so it's not a spoiler, but go back and listen to them if you're interested in how we've unpacked this. It's not an environmentally friendly choice, for example.
Well,
it's not. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm saying these are the perspectives that people put out. It's not environmentally friendly. It's not, there's only limited resources on the planet. It's, not about, capacity. How are you going to be able to, 2 parents, if you've got 2 parents and 2 children, you can split your time between them. But as soon as you do more, aren't you doing a disservice to the other children? Yeah. What about your career?
Especially as a woman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, Tiff saying 2.5 children in a lab. Exactly. Anything that deviates from that is crazy.
Yeah, it's
unwise. And so talking about it, especially I think because obviously my perspective was I very much wanted a 3rd child, feels a bit luxurious and a bit self-centered. And in one sense, it kind of is, because it's your family, so you get to be a little bit selfish about your own family.
Yeah. Isn't everything we do kind of self-centered?
But it just, when you say it out loud, it just seems like it's not the humanitarian answer for people who would consider themselves, I guess, I'm talking about us, in a public persona to be people who try to consider others. I mean, it's not just a public persona; it's real, but it is part of our.
There's going to be another expose about how awful Terrence is on the inside.
No, it's real. But what I'm saying is, like, people, you know, we try to it sounds so cheesy, like, do good in the world, and then it's like, but hold on a second, here's this chick talking about wanting to have a third baby. Like, you know, surely her time and resources and energy could be put to better use.
I think the thing that we're safe from, at least, is that in all of our public conversations, we're very clear that we are incredibly human and fallible and correctable. So even in making this podcast, like, firstly, we make sure that every episode make it clear, like, this is our particular perspective on this. We're not saying we're right. This is the thing that we think. One of my managers just joined. One of my big bosses have just joined. So,
hello.
hi, Patrick.
I'm totally thinking about work.
Yeah. Actually, I have to go answer an email. So because we've never positioned ourselves as like these perfect parents with like this perfect home and perfect household, far from it. That if we do something or say something that comes across as, oh, that's not great, I think people will give us a lot more space and grace to process that.
You think that?
I think that.
What was your fear, though? What was your biggest fear putting it out?
So this is interesting because Julie never asks me questions.
No, I do. No, you just keep taking the conversation.
Julie, you can
cut down on other. Thanks. You can just cut down on other carbon footprint stuff to make up for it.
Yeah, we compost.
I mean, we're gonna just have to put our private plane out of commission.
No, well, we can put the one out of commission. We need to keep one private plane for ourselves. Otherwise, how will I get to all my climate conferences?
What was your? I see. We'll go back to the comments.
Okay.
I've read them.
Yeah.
What is your? What was your fear?
So my biggest fear was literally the exact opposite. My biggest fear was if we were starting to have this conversation, because I've positioned myself, especially with our friends, as like the anti-extra baby guy.
Very strongly so.
Historically,
very strongly
like,
so.
And just like people know that I'm happy with the 2 kids that we have, that me just opening the door to like be part of this conversation would get people very excited, and my worry was that I would end up disappointing those people.
That's interesting.
You know,
I thought you were going to say,
like,
people were going to be like, how dare you, we thought you were holding on to this perspective for so long.
That was, I think that was also part of it, definitely. I was also nervous about that happening, but I think more nervous because I think that there are a lot of people that we know and who kind of know us either personally or just kind of parasocially that would love us to have another child. Like I think there are people who like are rooting for Team Julie in this conversation. There are a lot more people rooting for Team Julie than like, yeah, Terrence, you are so spot on about this. Obviously, because they're not the ones having to have the baby. They just want to have another cute biracial baby in the world, and you know, who wouldn't? But but I think okay, sorry, wearing all my hats. I'm sure load shedding has something to do with that signal. So that was something that I was really nervous about, was getting people all excited before any decision was actually made. And also that excitement affecting, because I'm a people pleaser, and I know it's crazy to like, this is definitely one space you shouldn't be pleasing people. You should be making a decision for yourself. But it's hard not to be biased by that kind of noise. Yeah. But
I think that's why it was really important that we did not release this in real time. That was, I mean, I think we sort of mentioned that, to be honest, to me before we started recording, and definitely after episode 1 and episode 2. And I think we had to keep saying, like, it's okay if this never sees the light of day. It'll just be, you know, it's just the fun stuff. Maybe one day we'll find it on an old hard drive or something.
Yeah. So what you're listening to as the episodes is how our conversation evolves in isolation from everyone else.
Could I ask you, and you do touch on this in episode 4, I think.
The one we released last week.
I think the one we released last week. But could you just set the record straight for the good people? Because you are, when you express yourself passionately, you do not mince your words. And sometimes you
what are you
hold on a second. You overstate your position in order for dramatic effect. I'm not going to say it to make sure that...
How dare you!
Exactly. You love a dramatic...
I am leaving!
Exactly. But can you let the good people know so that I do not seem like this crazy ass wife?
So honestly, this was my other fear. This was like another fear that I had. Was that...
And you didn't even let me finish my sentence.
Well, because I know you well enough to know where you're going.
Not everyone does.
Okay, well, I'll explain. Sorry. Yes, because I'm the only one that interrupts. The other fear was that Julie would be painted as like this nagging wife that's like prodding her husband along until he like succumbs to her will, right? Which is like, you know, a narrative that often, well, maybe not often happens, but we see that kind of narrative of like the wife wants a baby, wants won't keep quiet about it, and the husband finally like relents, which is just a terrible way for a child to come into the world. So I didn't want that to happen, and in fact, that was one of the things that was mentioned in episode 4 was me saying I wanted to make sure that if I do decide, yes, let's do this thing, that it was my decision for me, not because I wanted to make you happy.
Yeah. And I think, because we've had this conversation effectively from when our youngest was about 2 years old on and off, that there have been, I don't want to paint myself as like a saint, there have been times where I've been like, please, like, can we just, this family's not complete, I want another baby. And we've had very big arguments about it. But then there have also been times where you've been like, hold on a sec, maybe like, could we have another baby? Like, actually, that sounds quite nice.
Yeah.
And I've gone like, hold on a second, like, we can't now for X reason or Y reason, or we don't have the space, or so we have actually both crisscrossed over that. But I think a lot of those conversations have happened in private because of all the things that you just said about your opinion needing to feel...
Needing to maintain my position publicly.
But you have, for anyone who knows us personally, they've probably heard you hold a very strong position on this.
Yes. Yeah, and again, I think I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the early episodes, maybe like 2 or 3. One of the reasons why I held such a strong position is because I didn't want to give you any hope.
Yes.
Because I think for me, the worst idea was for me to say, I'm not sure, and then for you to hold that hope that maybe one day I'll change my mind, and then that hope being dashed. So in my mind, it was safer to be like this hard ass, maintain this hard line, to help you work through the sense that you're like the loss that you were feeling.
Yeah, and I think
which isn't a
but in hindsight, it wasn't like,
it wasn't a mature way to do it.
Yeah, I think we have to do it over again. I would have said, please trust me enough. In fact, I think it would have, in the moments where it was hard and it was actually just impossible. Like when we had, please post this to the grid. Oh, what's going on? Oh, okay.
Questions.
Okay, cool. We'll see questions now. Sorry. I kind of wish, going back, that you had felt confident enough to tell me that you were not as sure as you made out to be, because there was a large portion of time where really I think I would have agreed. I would have been the heartbreak would still be there, but I would have agreed that it wasn't going to be the right time to have a baby. Like we were still living, when Eli was 2, we were still living in our apartment. There was literally it was a 2-bedroom apartment for 4 of us. Like, where was this baby going to sleep? And I would have agreed, but I think I would have felt validated or comforted, not validated, comforted, knowing that the struggle wasn't just mine. Because I kind of just felt like I'm crazy for feeling this way.
Yeah, so I think this we're going to stuff that's probably going to be in the next episode, and also this is more podcasting than I actually wanted this to be. But anyway, in response to that, I think there's also like a whole conversation about how men are trained to position themselves in families and the role they have to take up as like the foundation that cannot be broken.
The people listening can see this as a bonus episode.
Okay, yeah,
it's
guys,
like a bonus,
you are getting some stuff
depth.
some more depth. That's true.
The
unreleased stuff. And
unedited.
Yeah,
and live. This is a bad idea.
So there's definitely. You got to be super careful. So hey Sean.
Hello.
Sorry, we're talking about this and not our other podcast. Sean and
I'm very aware that you've got another cop. Why are you apologizing? You're not.
Because anyway,
Sean gets it.
Yeah, he does get it. So anyway, about the space that fathers, or the role that fathers are told they need to take up in the house. I think that was one of the reasons that led me into this idea that, like, I cannot be shaken.
Yeah.
I know I can't be seen to be like wavering in my opinion about stuff. How dare I change my opinion? I need to be the strong pillar of the house, which in irony, all good things start as bad ideas. Well, yes, we do. We are very good at making bad ideas. The other thing is that after Eli was born, I went on a very long mental health journey, which, you know, I'm still kind of on that journey of getting stronger, being healthier mentally. So that was also part of, like, the people pleasing and the, you know, not being able to, like, assert my own will into spaces and feeling like I have, like, you're either completely dominant or you're completely, like, you know, accepting.
I mean, I understand it. I understand.
Yeah. But I'm explaining to, like, because there might be someone there who's in the same position, even though there's.
You started to allude to one of the questions that was asked earlier, which is that just because of the nature of how the podcast went, as we said, we didn't time it week by week. There was a promise of a cons list episode.
Yes.
That
So let's
didn't
answer that.
happen. Although we do
Let's
allude to the cons throughout the other episodes, but it wasn't a blow by blow.
It wasn't me presenting a list.
So would you like to present a list
so
of
episode
cons?
episode 2, I think this process confirms one thing, that you need to have podcasts that are going forward.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I'm not sure.
It's a lot of work. I don't do most of it, but it's still a lot of work. Okay, I know it's a lot of. I'm actually acknowledging your labor and your creative contribution to the world. Hold on a second. Okay, but I've retained executive producer status to this whole endeavor.
This is how
and
everything
creative
goes.
director.
No, this is how everything goes in this house. Julie goes, I have this great idea. I said, that's a great idea. We should do it
Great
together.
idea.
And then Julie goes, okay. And then she walks off. And then I'm stuck. Hey, we should build a gate here. We should. Okay. But I'll stand there drinking my cup of coffee and going, is that the right word? I'm not sure.
Those things have to be pondered. First of all, okay, but I will say that so recording it has been, recording it happened over time and you led the process. But I think because we've been releasing it week by week and we
have to
re-listen and then just double check that we're still comfortable putting out everything that we've said. Then it's like a time thing because we make sure that it's like live before 9 a.m. on Friday morning because otherwise people ask us. So like, where is it? Which is great and we love that. We don't want to disappoint people.
So for instance, tomorrow night we're going to be re-listening to the next episode to double make sure that it's ready to go for Friday morning.
Yes.
So that's
so it just feels like it sits. I don't know how you felt, but I felt like every week I listen to the episodes about 3 times before because I have to.
Julie freaks out about this.
I do freak out because it's very vulnerable stuff and you don't want to say something that's going to be
Yes, remember that. Remember that, Candice. I don't do most of it. That is what she said, and now we have it on record.
I mean, but let's not forget whose genius idea this all was to begin with.
Ideas mean nothing. Execution is everything.
Yeah, at every stage.
Okay, but can I just speaking about us continuing the podcast or working something creatively. The big issue with this podcast is that because it's so personal. Julie overthinking? Never. Yeah, exactly. Because it's so personal, it had to have. We needed that 6 month to 8 month recording period. We needed the gap between the last episode before recording the last episode and releasing the first episode. And because of that gap, we needed to re-listen to the episodes over and over again.
Yeah, we had conversations about this podcast.
So most podcasts wouldn't need that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wouldn't need to do that kind of structure.
And also, our lives are not going to be that much more interesting beyond.
I don't think. Okay, if we ever do a podcast, it won't be about our lives.
What else are we going to talk about?
I get bored in my own life. I doubt anyone else wants to listen to it.
Maybe we should just talk about other couples.
I think that would be the next thing. If there is a natural evolution of this, we've recorded 6 episodes, and that's where we feel like it's naturally come to an end. But if there is an evolution of it, or for season 2, I think that would be us talking to other couples, people like Candice, who's made the decision. Let's talk about that. People who are, and definitely would have to be couples, who are comfortable being in that same personal and vulnerable space that we were in
Tiff
for
and
season
Rich
1.
on here.
Tiff
Love
and,
story.
Tiff and
Or
Rich.
Sean.
Shauno.
Or we're just outing people who are following. People can just start leaving this thing so we don't start calling their names
No,
out.
no. Yeah,
for future episodes.
but you know who you are.
Yeah.
And if we do a season 2, we're coming for you. Okay. So that's kind of where we're thinking of going, because obviously, like we keep saying in this season, this is our particular story. It's our style of making this decision, and it's not a blueprint. But I think it would be great for people to hear how other couples who are like them, in the same situation as them, have these conversations, which would be cool to do. I'm not sure if I'm up for dealing with this one.
It's a lot of work.
Have you considered fostering from a children's home?
Heather, I'm not sure if you know our backstory.
Yeah, if you did, you wouldn't be asking that question. I feel vulnerable having those discussions with an audience too. Hearing you two be brave enough to make this intrigues me. Yeah, so we're a game. Let's do it. Yeah, I didn't doubt that Tiffany would be game. Candice,
I'm pretty certain Sean would be too.
Okay, let's do. Okay, so we reverse order. Candice's comment. Having these conversations publicly definitely isn't for everyone. We're the strange ones.
We are.
For wanting to do it publicly, because it is a personal conversation. Oh, no,
shit.
Heather,
Don't
worry.
be
We'll explain.
We'll explain.
Because it was years ago, so don't worry.
Yeah. I don't want to be like, been there, done that. That sounds like such a terrible thing to say in response.
But been there,
but yeah, we have history there.
And then, so to Candice's point, a season 2 would require, the difficult part of season 2 would require finding couples. Both couples are willing to have a personal conversation, so not just the wife, which I think would be easier than the husband, but getting a couple in a space where they're willing to have a personal and vulnerable conversation, and then prepping them to do it. Like the pre-work of an episode like that would be, hey, this is the way it's going to go, this is the way it's going to feel, that, don't stress about saying something wrong because we'll edit it out, that, you have...
It's a big process. It's lots of trust.
It's a lot of trust involved, and we look trustworthy.
Okay, before we talk about a podcast that we haven't yet created, let's stick to the one that we have. And do you want to answer, because this is your only chance to do it, the cons list?
Can I talk quickly about why there isn't a cons list?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so here's the thing about our radio style, our podcasting style, not our conversation style.
Do we have a radio style?
Well, we do, because we release a podcast. Okay. Julie is very articulate, and I am a very good listener and asker of questions. And because of that, generally the episodes, and I know this because I've edited them a billion times, so I can see the audio tracks of how much each of us speaks. Generally, it's Julie saying something, me finding that interesting, and asking a carry-on question from what she just said, and then responding to that.
This is not painting me in a good light.
No, it's not that. It's just
I can't edit it out because it's
I'm saying you the things you are saying are really profound and deep and need deeper exploration.
Hey, Tasman.
And I'm doing something that I never do. I compliment myself, so you should be rewarding me for this, because I don't seriously compliment. Anyway, that's the whole other thing. And I'm saying, I know I'm good at active listening and asking the obvious question, right? So because of that kind of dynamic, it tends to be you saying something, me following on, you saying something, me following on, you saying something like deep, and I'm like, whoa, we have to explore that deeper, right? And so that's why naturally a cons list wouldn't happen, because Julie is thinking deeply about the stuff that she needs to say.
That is absolutely not why the cons list didn't happen. And I don't want to spoil it for the good people who have not listened to the first 3 episodes, but it was because we were not recording this every week. We were recording this when we had a gap in a very busy, tumultuous season of our lives, and we pivoted out of the plan and kind of, started...
So episode 2 was the pro list.
The episode 3 was supposed to be the cons list, but then we decided to kind of...
Things
shifted. A big shift happened.
In
Spoiler.
episode 3. It's available.
The episode's out, so you can go and listen to it. But effectively, we set a particular path in motion, and we had to speak about it because it was the most pressing thing.
Yes. But then at no point did you say, at no point did you say after that, hey, Terence, we still need to do a cons list.
Because the train had left the station.
Let me sit down talk to you about the consulate.
Okay, well, I've asked you about 3 times to please answer the dear listeners'
Candice,
question.
how do you steer the conversation, and do you decide beforehand what won't be included?
No. It really is. I think people, like, there's nothing scripted. We literally will be having dinner before, so we record after the kids go to bed, over dinner, or...
Well, it'll be like a period of a few weeks where we're like...
No, but we'll say, okay, are we going to talk about this tonight? Sure.
Yes.
General theme, let's get started. And then we get started and we go. I will say, because obviously it is edited afterwards, so it's not overly edited. In fact, we take out very, very little, just some waffling. But there have been 1 or 2 times...
waffle?
There have been 1 or 2 times when we... You know, I have maybe, you clumsily phrase something. It's always,
or you use a bad example.
Exactly. Or you make a reference to something that you wouldn't have any, and no one else would understand. And then we choose to kind of edit that out.
Yeah. Because again, it is our personal conversation and stuff that we talk about.
Yeah.
The way we talk isn't necessarily the way we talk in public. So it was the difficulty was mashing those 2 spaces together, was how we talk together at home. This is how we talk together in public, but we are one of those couples that quite luckily those 2 are pretty close together.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot to edit out. And again, when your goal is to have an honest conversation, or at least to show what an honest conversation looks like, then that makes the editing out of stuff pretty minimal.
I will say you have to hold to that commitment though. It's hard. There have been times when I've wanted to edit out more than we have.
Yes.
We've released things and I'm like, please can you edit that out? I just sound like a crazy baby hungry like weirdo. And you're like, but that's how you felt in the moment. Or I'm like,
because that's who you are.
Super depressed about something.
Yeah, exactly.
I've even, specifically the episode that launches on Friday,
yeah,
is very vulnerable. And I'm trying to
episode.
talk about issues of feminist identity and myself, and like, what people are going to think about me if we choose, if we do have a baby. And it's just it's a hard thing. And we haven't finished editing it yet.
If there's ever going to be an episode that has a lot taken out by Julie, it's going to be next week's episode, because things get real.
Before you go back, a million times over, just give people, do you not have a cons list?
Okay, here's the thing. I do have a cons list. I naturally have a cons list. Mm-hmm. My worry about the cons list is that it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Like,
I also have a cons list.
Yeah, like finances. Right off the bat, right? Having a baby is freaking expensive, and there is no way that perhaps to aid your decision, it would be benefit to you to do a trauma-informed care course. To aid this big decision.
Keep listening, Candice. Keep listening. I don't know if you've listened to any of the episodes, but the ship sailed in episode 3. It's the truth.
Don't give it away.
Well, she hasn't listened now. She's going to be intrigued. Other people have.
You see, this is what happens. I start my cons list and then Julie interrupts me about something else. Yeah. So we have a culture where children generally don't ever bring money back into the family. So it's not like, when the kid's 16, they go off to work and they start to bring resources back into the household. So kids are just a financial dump in our culture. It's true. They are like the amount of stuff you could do if you didn't have children is immense. And I know I have a lot of friends who are close to my age who don't have kids and whose income is around about the same as ours. And the kind of stuff they can do is they're just much more financially mobile. They can make much more fun decisions. They can make much more life. Like I have a friend who's like, I think I would love to go and study filmmaking overseas. I'm like, how do you do that? And he's like, I can do that. I'm just going to go. I'm just going to do that. So there's that. Then there's like I mentioned earlier, when Eli was born, I had a real bad time with my mental health, and I am concerned that those demons are going to come back. They're going to reappear. Even though I do have the tools and the resources to work against that, I now I still worry that it's going to be that knock to my mental health.
Very valid.
I worry about our boys and having a baby sibling that's like 8-9 years younger than they are, and that gap. I'm a lot lucky. I'm 6 years younger than my brother, 14 years younger than my sister, and I did feel that growing up. So, yes, Tiffany, the Michael McIntyre leaving the house with kids skit is exactly it. Where my friends, they get in their car and they drive off. When you have, especially young children, there's no getting in your car and driving off. There's like 1,000,000,005 things you have to think about. And I mean, you definitely know what that's about. So, so I spoke about finances. I spoke about the life choices you can make. I spoke about mental health. I spoke about the boys. I worry about our relationship because babies are precious. It's very easy for the father to get lost in the family. When it's like baby, older, middle brother, younger brother, older brother, the dog, the cats, our work, friends, family, and then like I'm not even on the screen. I'm like down here somewhere, and then and it sounds selfish because again, fathers shouldn't want to be cared for and cherished and be shown affection and have people value them. That's not the right thing for dad to do. Dad should just be like, quietly killing themselves in the corner. Like, that's what our society tells men and fathers. And I'm trying to fight that. And I'm trying to say, like, listen, actually, if there's a limit to how much emotional affection is available in our house, and we bring in another being that's going to push me even further down the ranks, am I going to be able to deal with that? How does that affect our relationship? So those are just like a few off the top of my head. Then there's things like the world is changing. The world's changing faster than we are even able to conceive. So the world that this child is going to be growing up in isn't the world that even our older boys are going to be growing up in. Like, it's going to be a fundamentally different world. Is that a world we want to bring a child up in? So yeah, you asked for cons and now you're very quiet all of a sudden. Why would you be so low in the hierarchy though? That's sat here. Candice, you are right. That is not necessarily the reality. That's not necessarily that's not what would happen. That's something part of the mental health thing was that like my anxiety would make me feel like that is going to happen. Or even if it isn't happening, I would perceive it as happening that way.
Yeah, and I think the reality is when you have small children specifically, if you've been through, and just for context, in case you don't know our backstory, our two boys are 18 months apart. So we had two babies in nappies, both not sleeping, one on the boob, one on the bottle, requiring huge amounts of time. It is hard to prioritize anything for yourself or for your relationship in that season without significant additional support and capacity, which we did not have. So I think it's fair to say that there was a period of time where, despite the fact that we loved each other very much and were committed, it was hard
neither of
to
us would
prioritize ourselves, and it was definitely hard to prioritize our relationship when you're just kind of trying to,
survive.
Each go to sleep with a particular child. One's got the baby, one's got the toddler, and you say you'll meet up, once they've fallen asleep, but you end up snoring next to the little human and waking up in the middle of the night with like your clothes still on. Like, that happens many times. It's happened to us. I know it's happened to many other people.
Yeah.
And so without really kind of thinking about whether enough time has changed and enough life has changed, or there's been enough maturity and growth, that, there is still a risk that an element of that will happen again.
Yeah, like when I seriously think about it, when I like really take a critical view of our lives, I get less anxious about that happening because, like I say, our lives have changed fundamentally, but there is still that innate like fear inside of me, and I actually more worry about the fear making me do dumb things than that fear coming true.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So yeah, that's my initial comment. So glad you mentioned mental health implications right up there with finances for us. Yeah, raising kids are hard. Kids are full of nonsense. As much as we love and adore them.
And I think the difference is if you have had a mental health, if you've struggled with your mental health specifically. I think for couples for whom that's not been part of the experience, whether it's a parent struggling with postpartum depression or any other pre-existing mental health condition, like it's not easy to understand how murky that world can be and how consuming it can be. But the reality is it is, and you have to be, part of the reason why we could sort of have this conversation about deciding is that there's been a lot of collective work put in, strategies and a commitment to kind of ongoing care. But it's always there. it's like a little thing lurking in the background that could come back in a very significant way.
Yeah. I have one more comment before we read Franchuk's mom. Wait, is that right? Franchuk's mom's point? My final con is that right now, in the entire history of our marriage, this is the happiest and most content we've been, right? The boys are at an age where, like, they were just really great. Like, they're just cool kids, and I like them. I love them. Obviously, I've always loved them, but like now I actually really like them. And both our work is going well, and because the boys are older, we both have the capacity to travel for work occasionally when we need to, without feeling guilty that like we're putting the other person in too much pressure. You can go away for like the occasional weekend for work when you need to, without like, oh, the house is going to fall apart, because that the boys are old enough and we can all deal with it. We're living in a nicer home than we ever have before because, partly because we didn't have a third child. And so my worry is that third child would, why are you in the cup?
Just don't worry about it. I'll tell you later.
Oh, there was a cockroach in the cup. Oh, freak. How did the cockroach get in the cup?
I just don't want to talk about it. Don't look. Just keep going with the good people online. It's been terrible weather, and so some of the bugs from outside have crawled inside. Okay, sorry. I tried to I don't know why you took fix on the cup.
You totally just short-circuited me.
Sorry.
Sorry. I have one major fear, and it's cockroaches, and this is now.
Yeah, you were gonna die, so I just saved you.
Imagine I said it. You would have seen me completely.
I just want to protect your dignity.
Panic attack.
So
Thank you.
Let's just continue, because that was gonna be
so bad.
It's still bad, but it's over there. Would you like? I'm gonna just
could you just
get
take
up
it away?
And move it because you're gonna.
So Julie kills the cockroaches in the house because I've
stood on it. Just I'm gonna.
Okay. I know this seems like I'm like acting. I'm being overdramatic, but I really cannot handle.
You really can't.
I can't handle. Okay. What was I saying?
Something about me being amazing.
Yeah. Julie she is amazing. I don't know what I would do if I'm living in a cockroach-laden world without her. What was I saying before that? Our lives are great, and the third child could, if it could. But like, yes, I worry that it would ruin the dynamic. Like, I worry that like if we had another child, we'd roll that dice, and the dice would come up steak eyes and ruin the good stuff that we've got going on. So, okay, can I first go to the top? Valid cons. I'd be interested to know how many couples that decide to have a third actually go through this kind of decision process. I don't think many do.
We don't know.
It seems like a lot of people talk about this. Maybe not as deep as we've got.
Well, although what I have heard from just some of the comments to me, there are no more cockroaches. I looked at comments. Is that there is sort of there's a bit of a tension in the process. It might not be as honest with each other yet, but there's definitely a sense of like different perspectives in a room, and it's kind of what's a phrase? Like, it's just something they're not talking about. It's an elephant in the room. Okay, the conversation is an elephant in the room.
And I think one of the benefits of doing the podcast was that we couldn't hide how we actually felt. We had to be honest with each other to make the podcast worthwhile, right? So thank you, Franchuk Mom. Then Candice, my husband and I willfully prioritized our child for all these years and now realize that we neglected a large portion of our marriage and relationship. Yeah, I would say we potentially did the same. Maybe we were forced to do the same.
In the beginning, yeah.
In the beginning.
We had a big come to Jesus moment about it, yeah.
There is a danger because you do have to prioritize the young children, the young babies for time, but knowing when to make that switch back, like how long is that time? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? What happens if you have a child with special needs? Like how do you, again, and this is what we say in every episode, this is our particular story, yours, your mileage may vary, but that's a really difficult thing to work out. Like how long are the children the priority and the couple, the relationship takes a back seat. And I suppose that's something that you should actually talk about before the child arrives, so that there's no oh, it's been a year and he still hasn't shown me that I'm number one or whatever. So everyone knows. But yeah, that's really hectic. That's life for you. Yeah, Candice, it's a real deal. Tiffany from the Mobility Foundation. I'm so proud of you right now. That was the most prioritized you could ever been, Terence.
I think, is that in relation to the cockroach?
Is that in relation to the cockroach? Because I'm asking her to get rid of it. Yeah, Terence just borderline became unhinged at the thought. Yes. Everyone gangster to the cockroach has wings. Yes! Oh my word. You need to put a poll out there. Definitely an elephant in our house. Okay.
I think so. I definitely, the feedback that I've got is definitely that it sort of sits. It's something that people know needs to be discussed. Also because I think, especially if you're choosing to have a child biologically, there is a bit of a ticking time clock.
Yeah,
there's a ticking time clock, and so, it sort of sits there looming, and you kind of feel, oh my gosh, is time going to run out? Our other kids are getting older, and I'm getting older, and then not knowing exactly how to start that conversation in a way that it's not going to be immediately shut down. If it is your desire to have another child, it's hard.
And I wonder if there's a lot of assumptions being made about if you're not having the conversation, do you really know what your partner's thinking? Your partner could have said as a joke at a social event, oh, I would never want to have another kid, and then you exhibit A, but then actually they would be open to the conversation at the very least. And again, I think that's where all of our arguments came from, was mostly me not being honest with myself and honest with you about how I'm really feeling, and trusting that you can also deal with how I'm actually feeling about this, worrying that anything I said would be the worst, and because I come on so strong, you can't be honest with me because I'm don't even talk to me about it. So I'm the problem, I think, is what we've come up with with this life. Part of what I was thinking about when we first started talking about doing the podcast is getting a lot more feedback from people listening, so doing a poll and figuring it out. And I hesitated to do that because I felt, again, I wanted it to be clear that this was our story, and that I didn't want people to feel like to participate in the conversation they had to be as vulnerable as we were. Even if it's a anonymous poll, it still requires you to be honest with yourself, and maybe people aren't ready for that just yet.
But also, I think because when we had those ideas when we set out to do the podcast, which we thought would be a lot more predictable in its nature, and sort of be a conversation more with the audience, with our sort of future listeners, and it ended up just being effectively a collection of very personal conversations recorded, and so
we were surprised at the direction.
We thought okay, let's have this conversation, and how are we going to host this podcast, and how are we going to have people engage in the conversation with us? But actually, it just became the space we created for the podcast became a genuine, meaningful space for us to process it. Just that it just happened to be recorded.
Yes.
And so it's okay, it would have been more predictable. We would have had the intro, the pro list, the con list, the perspectives from the field, etc. And we just didn't, because it just didn't work out like that. Real life.
Yeah. Okay. So I think if you guys have any more questions, please put them in the chat right now. I think it's time for us to call it a night because we still have lunches to make and life to do. I'm sure you do too. So just while if you do have any more questions, I want to re-emphasize a couple of things about how the podcast actually works. Especially if you just joined. Number one, we recorded all of these episodes months ago.
Before we released episode 1.
Yeah. So if you are asking us to talk about something in the next episode, we're not going to be able to do that really because we can't go back in time.
Nope.
And plus it would ruin the flow of whatever conversation was happening there. Two, the second thing I want you to do, I would love people just to remember, is that they were also recorded with like weeks and months between each episode. So it can feel like, wait a second, last episode they were saying one thing, and then suddenly this episode, like Terrence has changed his mind completely. How did that happen? It's like, well, you have to realize that it hasn't been 7 days. In some cases, it's been like 2 months or 3 months of more. It wasn't like that's the only conversation we've had. We've had 3 months of conversation, which we're now distilling into episode 3 or episode 4.
Yeah. And also life happened. It wasn't just like this conversation. I think what we've realized that this conversation, our perspective on whether or not to have another baby, has been influenced by a lot that's happened this year.
Yeah.
You know, we've been through a lot.
Yeah, right.
Our family's been through a lot. And so it's just a very honest telling of kind of how this decision has been processed in real time with everything that we've been going through.
Yes. So please, we love that you're all listening. We're so we're blown away by how many people are messaging us and telling us they're enjoying it and listening and really getting in there. Like, thank you so much for doing that. But please, while you're listening to that, keep those things in mind because I think that'll help you understand, especially with the next episode that's coming.
Yes.
Because there's such a dramatic shift in episode 4 and episode 4 and 5 is very different from the first 3 episodes.
Absolutely.
And so, the tone shifts dramatically. If you're thinking, oh my word, what happened in the last week?
Yeah, they were talking very hypothetically.
Now these other things are going down.
It's turned.
So, Okay, cool. I don't think there's any more questions, so I think we'll call it an evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the chat. I hope you don't have any cockroaches in your house right now.
Yeah, I hope that was the last one.
I won't be able to sleep tonight.
No, you will, because
I saw a cockroach last night and I couldn't get to sleep.
Oh, well, I'll kill that one too.
Yeah, you will. My strong wife. Okay, thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, Emma just joined.
Oh, hi, Emma. Bye, Emma.
Hi, bye, Emma.
Love to listen to this post.
Okay, bye.
Bye, guys.